Perfect. All right. And let me just verify that we are actively live. It should be loading here in a second on my screen. And once we are actively live, then we are ready to rock. All right, we are live. So for anyone who is watching this, just talking about how we are going to be covering N8N, really breaking down the basics of N8N and how it works, what benefits it provides, and how we can leverage it as a more powerful automation system than, say, something like high level, for example, right? Because high level has a really powerful automation system, but it's not necessarily the best fit for automation systems that connect with third parties, especially when it comes to different authentication protocols and things like that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we'll break down the workflows, the nodes, the triggers, the type of language, what you can do with it. But yeah, so if anyone sees my eyes darting around or them light up green, I don't know if you can see that. No, you can actually, kind of a little bit, I guess. But I actually am wearing a new pair of glasses. If you may have noticed, I don't typically wear glasses. I used to, but I don't typically wear glasses since my eye surgery. And they are called Even Realities G2s, which are absolutely amazing. Shout out to Even Realities. They are a heads-up display, kind of like the Meta Ray-Ban version 3s, but a little bit more, in my opinion, advanced and kind of a better fit for what I'm looking for, which is live translations, AI research, conversation transcriptions, teleprompting, stuff like that. So I can actually read my presentation on my glasses as I'm presenting it, which I won't be doing today. But when I speak on stage, I plan to use the heck out of these, and I'm super, super, super excited. So definitely worth checking out. They're called Even Realities G2. I'll drop that in the Zoom chat. G2Bs. And they have different styles, but they're super thin. You can see, they only have the points at the end, but then it actually has a view screen. You can kind of see the shiny part, but they're super cool. I really like the fact that I get the notifications and the live transcriptions. It also records audio, so kind of like Claude or Limitless. All I have to do is say, "Hey, even," and then when I say, "Hey, even," it pops up with an AI screen. It'll actually research what I'm talking about as I'm talking about it, or as someone else is talking about it, which I think is super, super, super cool. All right, without further ado, let me kick off this N8N presentation. So we're going to go through probably about 15 to 20 minutes today of just reviewing some slides and talking about some different theories. I want you all to ask questions as you have them. And then once we are done with that, we are going to get into some practical application with N8N using N8N Cloud for the time being. So if you have a self-hosted instance, stand tight. You probably already know a lot of this stuff. But if you've never used N8N before, this is going to be a perfect session for you. So let me share my screen. Should be able to see my screen, which is PowerPoint. Let me pull up my Zoom chat, and feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. While I am talking, I will be keeping an eye on the attendees tab, as will my lovely moderator, Miss Coach Kara. So thank you again, Coach Kara, for always stepping up and being willing to help out on these calls. So basically, the foundations of N8N. So what is N8N and why does it matter? Who is it for? Is it for non-devs? Is it for so answering Anna's question, recommending Pentavo or N8N would be the recommended automation platform. It is the most robust, most powerful, most feature rich. It can do pretty much anything. You can actually build applications in N8N, which is pretty impressive. Like you can build the full back end of an application in N8N. So, and what you'll be able to build by the end, we're going to talk a little bit about that. So what is N8N, right? So think of a workflow or automation. You can do something like high level, for those of you that have used high level, or an automation being something that you are automating. right? And I hate to use the word in the definition, but an automation is something that you are automating. It is taking a manual process and making that manual process repeatable in an organized and efficient pattern, right? So that's what an automation is, taking a manual process and making it repeatable by a system or a platform like N8N, High Level, Keep, Active Campaign. All of these have automation systems. Zapier, Make, Zapier and Make specifically are a little bit more on the automation side. And those are the most comparable. Contavo is another example. Those are the most comparable to N8N itself. It allows you to connect apps, APIs, and data visually. So instead of needing to know how to code or needing to have really complex code structures, N8N actually allows you to visualize the node and trigger architecture, just like you see in this picture, or like you would see in High Level's workflow, especially the advanced workflow builder, which is actually modeled off of N8N. It is a low code solution. So low code meaning that you don't actually need to know anything about software development to use N8N. Now it does help. It does make a big difference when you are using N8N, understanding at least some of the core principles of software development, but it's definitely not a requirement. But one of the cool things with N8N is it actually has full code implementation, which is very unique compared to Zapier and Make. Zapier and Make don't offer inline code execution, meaning that you can't run automations using like JavaScript or Python, for example, right? Which are two different major programming languages. So N8N allows you to have that full code estate patch. And you can also do it self-hosted or in the cloud. So N8N self-hosted would be on like DigitalOcean or Hostinger or Manage N8N or one of these other platforms. And then the cloud instance is more akin to like Zapier and Make. It is essentially just a self-hosted instance, but published in the cloud with some additional features. So you have some different options there. And I'll drop the link to n8n.io, which is the link for N8N. And what I want you to do is as we're going through this presentation, go ahead and get signed up for a free cloud account. You shouldn't need to pay anything. You can put a credit card on file for the trial, but I don't believe they require, there's no credit card required for the free trial. You can just do the basic one, the $20 a month plan with 2.5 thousand executions. No credit card required. You get monthly billing. That'll give you like a 7 to 14 day trial, which will be ample for what we're talking about today. So you're going to want to go to n8n.io, and it's going to be under the pricing tab, and you're just going to start that free trial on that basic one. So as you get that done, just comment in the chat done. If you are watching this on Facebook or on YouTube, then feel free to just comment in the comments area, and I should be able to see it through the screen. So one of the reasons that N8N exists is there are so many different tools and languages and apps, right? So we talked about APIs on the last call, and we really went through kind of the importance of APIs in general, right? We talked about the restaurant ordering system, or the restaurant ordering style example where with an API, it's essentially a menu of API documentation is essentially a menu of how, where, and what you're going to do in communication. So essentially how to communicate with that application, what styles of communications you're going to have, and then where you're going to be communicating to. And an API is simply a phone call between a client and a server that runs back and forth that says, hey, I've got this question for you. And the server says, great, I've got an answer for you. Okay, so, but it's a little bit more structured than that, where the phone call says, hey, I've got a question for you. I'd like to know what color is the shirt located in the third drawer at 123 Bleecker Street. And the server responds, well, the shirt in the third drawer located at 123 Bleecker Street is green. Okay, so there's always a call and response. Well, N8N came out because there were a lot of repetitive tasks that people were doing that were wasting time calling between APIs. So whenever you like link, if you're familiar with Zapier or Make, whenever you link up those platforms to different softwares, those are API calls. Okay, so pretty much everybody in on this call and in this room and everyone that's watching at some point in your life has done something that is an API call. Well, N8N came out because they said, look, people are doing this manually and it's taking a really long time. There's not really a good visual builder. Zapier is stupid expensive. Make is really expensive. There's a lot of limitations on them. And it doesn't really, they're not really conducive to scaling. So that's where N8N came into play. When you need flexibility and ownership of your data, that's another big one. N8N is the only software that can be, the only automation software that can be made HIPAA compliant, which is a really big deal because you have to self-host your N8N instance and protect it and do some other stuff. You can run it internally, you can run it locally on your machine through Docker or NPM. So there's a lot of different options that you have when you're using N8N. Now, what is different about N8N, right, is that it's open source and self-hostable is number one, meaning you can host it on your own computer, you can host it on a cloud server, you can really host it anywhere you want. It has fair code licensing, meaning you're able to edit and modify certain things and use it freely without reselling the service. It allows for basically JavaScript and JSON to be pretty much everywhere. It has no hard limits on logic complexity, which is a really big deal for the automations that I build. And I'm going to show you some of those automations, but they're fairly complex. And one of the reasons why they're so complex, or one of the reasons why I use N8N, is because I don't run out of options like I do in Zapier and Make, right? So in Zapier and Make, the bigger the workflows, the more challenging they get. But in N8N, you can build some pretty stout, huge workflows, and it works. And you own your data, right? So owning your data is really important for a lot of organizations. I know that organizations that rely on Zapier and Make oftentimes feel very trapped, right? And they feel very trapped because they don't have the ability to export and save their information. They can't store it on their own server. It presents risks, especially in the healthcare and financial sector. So N8N solves a lot of these problems. Now, what is a workflow? So the concept of a workflow essentially is just, it can be as small as a trigger, and that trigger can be email received or webhook received. And the action can be as simple as download this file, right? So that's a very simple, it's just a chain of connected nodes. And we'll go over what nodes and triggers look like here in a couple minutes. But workflows can run automatically or manually. That's a really important note. You can automate things manually, as ironic as that sounds. When you have a multi-step process, but you only need to run it occasionally, you can actually have a manual action trigger so that it doesn't run programmatically on a trigger, whether that's time or action-based. You can loop, wait, make decisions, tie in AI. The entire workflow is actually stored in a JSON file, which is also super powerful. Because one of the things that means is that you can actually use Claude Code or Codex or ChatGPT or Claude Regular to actually build out your end-to-end scenario for you. And those are some really powerful ways that I know people are building out end-to-end scenarios, is by leveraging the AI capabilities in N8N. Now, N8N Cloud does come with some AI functionalities, which I think is super cool. So does N8N 2.0. There's a lot of really awesome stuff you can do in there. And that's all because it's stored as JSON over the hood. It's not, it's stored as an object JSON object in the database. So the front end essentially reads the JSON object, just renders it on the page. You make the edits and manipulations, and it saves that entire JSON object to the database. Why that's important is you're able to easily download and upload scenarios into your N8N account. So nodes are the building blocks of automation, right? So nodes can be things like a trigger node, which can be based on time. It can be manual action. It can be action based. So things like receiving an email, receiving a webhook, those are all triggers. Okay, so you have to start a workflow somewhere. And if you're using high level, you're familiar with the concept of triggers and actions and utility nodes and things like that. N8N is really very similar. So if you've mastered high level workflows and you know how to use them and build at a systems level, it's actually very simple to use N8N. And we'll get into kind of the comparison between the two here momentarily. The logic nodes and the utility nodes are really powerful because those are the decision points that are being made in the N8N workflows. So where you have a call and response API call to a server to get some information, like let's say get a contact or get all contacts, you have to do something with those contacts, right? Those are going to be your logic and utility nodes. Now, there's one type of node that's actually missing in this example, and that's AI nodes. In N8N, one of the other things that makes it so incredibly powerful is that it actually has agentic AI nodes inside of the N8N workflows. Zapier and Make can't even come close to touching that. Neither can high level. So what you do is you have trigger nodes that are where the workflows start. So you have things like manual trigger, webhook trigger, schedules, or application-based triggers, new records, new messages, new contacts, things like that. You then have the data that flows between the nodes, right? So it flows between the nodes, each item being a JSON object, and the nodes can add, remove, or transform data. Multiple items can also be processed in parallel, which is another huge advantage. Make is linear, so is Zapier. So there are some limitations there, but N8N can run items in parallel. Multiple workflows can also run in parallel. So you can have the same trigger on multiple workflows, or you can actually domino trigger workflows where you have the workflow execute another workflow. So you have sub workflows and subroutines and things like that. But it's very, very powerful. You have expressions and variables. So this is one area where it differs from Zapier and Make in that the expressions and variables give you the ability to essentially combine JavaScript and other languages with the N8N execution. Very, very powerful. If you're familiar with like custom fields or custom values inside of high level, the variables and expressions are exactly the same concept, right? So a variable, for example, would be like JSON.item.content. And that variable would pull from the previous node the content field in the JSON output from the previous node. Now, you've heard about me talking about JSON in the API conversation, but just a quick refresher, JSON is a universal structured machine language that is, it's kind of like Markdown or HTML. It's really designed very explicitly by it has a standard that is actually set for what JSON objects, arrays, keys, values, all of that can look like, so that any program can read JSON. The majority of the application programming interface or API communications that you're going to have are using JSON. There are some limited examples where they use XML or other technologies, raw strings, things like that. But by and large, or multi-part form data, but by and large, the majority of the communications from APIs are going to be in that JSON format. So just a quick refresher, if you need to understand a little bit more about JSON, you're curious about it, I definitely recommend Googling or asking ChatGPT to give you some examples. You don't need to be a JSON expert. N8N is actually going to tell you if your JSON is valid or not. It's also going to give you some options that are even lower code where you don't need JSON. It will translate a visual form into a JSON payload and then communicate with the API that way. Um, the logic and control flow is really important to understand in N8N the same way that you have in high level, but you actually have even more power in N8N with the logic and control flow because you can stack multiple variables. You can, it has a lot better functionality in the, um, it has a lot better functionality in the ability to switch between nodes, to multipath route, to hop, to skip, to sleep, to wait, to truncate. There's just tons of options in the logic and control flow. So you can say, for example, if content contains keyword and the keyword is 0, then if it says like there are 0 results returned, then if the content contains the word 0, you can actually set an if branch that will say, if it contains 0, proceed down this path. Else, if it's true, if it doesn't contain the word 0, proceed down a different path. You then have switch nodes for multiple paths where you can actually route you can route to multiple paths all at once, which is incredibly powerful. That gives you your parallel execution. You can also route nodes through switches in singular execution mode, which means that it only proceeds down one path, the first path that matches, versus all paths that match. You can merge and break out data. So you can merge data together, which is something that I use a lot. And that's one of the workflows I'm going to demonstrate for you guys here in a minute, which is going to be a little bit of a complicated workflow to demonstrate, but I want to show you what it does because I think it provides value in understanding kind of my logic behind the systems flow of things. You can loop over items. This is a really big one for larger data sets. So a lot of what I work with is really big amounts of data, like tens of thousands of contacts. So if you try and run an API call with tens of thousands of contacts all at once to perform an action, the API is going to throw back a rate limit or something. All APIs, for the most part, will either break or throw back a rate limit saying, hey, you can only process a certain amount of data at one time, and that's what the looping function is for. The error handling is also really powerful in N8N because it's automatic. So you can actually set a standard workflow to notify you on errors. And then when you set that standard workflow to notify you on errors, you just select that in your workflow construction in the N8N builder, and it gives you all that information super easily. Chris Vincent, really glad that I was able to simplify this for you. We're definitely going to break down into a little bit more information. But yeah, feel free to ask questions. Anyone who wants me to pause for a second, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Drop a thumbs up in the chat if you are learning something today. Hopefully everyone is going to take away some valuable nuggets about N8N. So one of the cool things with N8N is you can actually store your credentials and security. You can store your OAuth, your API keys, your basic authorization. You can reuse data across different workflows. You can use environment variables for secrets. What that means is that instead of hard coding an API key into a workflow, like some people do, which is very dangerous, you can actually store them securely in a credentials vault and reuse them. This is especially relevant for OAuth management and things like that. N8N has native OAuth support. So for those of you who all hate OAuth, N8N is the ideal choice because it really simplifies the OAuth flow for you. It gives you some very clear instructions on what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. The reusable components across workflows are really important because as you are building out the workflows, you want to make sure that you are not having to put in that API key over and over again. A lot of API keys you can only view once, so you store them securely in your end-to-end credentials vault. The code node and the JavaScript power, this is an honorable mention and probably one of the most worthwhile mentions of N8N. N8N allows you to actually run JavaScript and Python inside of a code node. What that means is you can run massive processing and data manipulation code inside of N8N to call external APIs, handle edge cases. It can act as the brains when needed. What this means, and why it's a competitive advantage over Zapier and Make, is because Zapier and Make don't allow this, meaning that you have to operate within the confines of their very explicit tool set. Whereas N8N allows you to pull in external packages, you can load all sorts of stuff, which makes it by far the most powerful automation platform on the market. So the JavaScript component, this is again something that you can get in ChatGPT. Oftentimes, I'm lazy, and while I could write the code, what I want is ChatGPT to just write it for me. So what I do is I say, hey, ChatGPT, here's my JSON input. This is what I'm looking to achieve as an output. Write me a JavaScript code for an N8N code node, and this is my exact prompt. Here's my output of what I'm receiving, or my inputs of what I'm receiving. Write me a code node to do this function to that data, and it will actually write out the full JavaScript. You can just copy and paste it right into N8N. So the same with JSON formatting and everything like that. You don't even need any special tools or anything like that. It can all be done using ChatGPT. So if you're getting stuck in N8N, I highly recommend that you leverage ChatGPT and Claude because they are both very, very familiar with N8N. I use them on a daily, almost like a crutch when I'm in N8N, just because it really makes things so much faster, which is how I'm able to build pretty massive scenarios in a very short period of time. So some common use cases are things like CRM automation. So if you've ever built a site in Lovable or in High Level, and you want to transmit that data to another CRM or to High Level. Lead routing and enrichment. So being able to use things like Apify, other nodes, stuff like that. You can AI power those workflows. So you can incorporate any AI model through OpenRouter or any of N8N's native AI models, which is pretty impressive. You can data sync between tools on a programmatic, meaning an action-based trigger, or on a schedule or manually. So there's a lot of value and power inside of N8N. It also has chat functions, form functions, and even more that I'm still uncovering. And I've been using N8N again since they came out. So I'm always learning something new, especially from Kayla Love and from Haley Brown. The two of them are absolute N8N rock stars. So we're actually in one of these future sessions, we're going to have both of them on to talk through different N8N workflows and ideas that they have. So be on the lookout for that announcement for when we have those special guests. So again, you have different deployment models. You can use N8N Cloud, which is the free version. Temporarily, it's free for the free trial. You can do the fully free version, which is self-hosted, that you can put on your computer, or you can put in a virtual machine. You have queue mode and single instance, meaning that you can actually daisy chain N8N servers together, which is super, super powerful. And there's a lot you can do with self-hosted and the N8N Cloud version. You really have to consider what you're scaling. Like, for example, I run about 2 million operations a week now. I used to run about 2 million a day. N8N Cloud would be cost prohibitive for me. So with Zapier and so would Make, it cost me probably about $14,000 to $18,000 to run my automation systems at the scale that I run them now using Zapier or Make. Whereas with N8N, it's 100% free, right? I just paid the $50 or $60 for the N8N hosting, which you can get through DigitalOcean, again, Hostinger. There's a lot of other companies that do N8N specific hosting. But the N8N self-hosted version does have the advantage of it is 100% free for the actual software and license. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, we've already talked about APIs, and webhooks. We'll talk a little bit about the advanced error handling, the AI integrations, and the version control and backups. to build those reusable workflow templates. Mindsets for N8N Builder. This is one slide that I threw in at the end because I thought it was really valuable. You need to think in data flows, not in clicks. Start very simple with what the input trigger is and what you want to have happen next, and just keep going down the line of what you want to have happen at each stage and build out a full system, which is really what's powerful. So you can inspect the data to debug it. You can automate all of the work that you are doing currently, like email management. I have that automated. So also things like, you've heard a lot about OpenClaw, and which is formerly ClaudeBot. You've heard a lot about OpenClaw, which just got purchased by OpenAI, actually. And OpenClaw is really just an AI version of N8N. It doesn't replace N8N because N8N is more for procedural automations that are repetitive, but OpenClaw is the same principle. It's just using AI to automate those tasks on a reactive basis, as opposed to proactively coding them and building them out in N8N. All right. So I'm going to stop my screen share really quick, and we're about 30 minutes past the hour. So does anyone have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to, I will ask you to unmute, and then you are welcome to ask any questions you have, or you can drop them in the Zoom chat while I get the next portion of our presentation pulled up. If you'll just bear with me for a second, and I will show you what an N8N workflow looks like. We will explain how the workflow itself works. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. So I'm going to share the screen, and we're going to go in here. And this is a analysis tool. Now here is the original analysis tool that I built. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on my screen so you can see that a little bit easier. Let me zoom in and move the Zoom chat because it's hard to do both. And I hate the swipe over. There we go. All right, so what we have right here is a trigger, which is a form. Now this form asks for first and last name, their email address, and for them to upload an audio recording to the scenario. This is a trigger node, okay? So again, it's if this, then that is the concept behind N8N, Zapier, and Make, right? And high level, any automation system, the idea is that you have a trigger, something that a trigger can be. If I come over here, I can add another trigger, and there's tons of different trigger types. So there are chat messages executed by another workflow, form submissions, webhook calls. On app event, if I go into app event, it brings up a list of all the different apps that have available triggers that I can use, which is quite a few. As you can see, I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and that will just continue scrolling. Oh, look, we hit the bottom. But these are all different apps that essentially are going to automatically create webhooks or watch the changes in the status of the triggered SaaS application. We then have action nodes. So my first action node right here is I'm going to upload that file to Google Drive. So this is where this is merge field, just like you have in high level for custom values and custom fields. It's no different. It's just a different way of looking at them. So when you get confused and you feel frustrated in N8N because something's not working, remember that everything is really just variables, triggers, actions, and logic. Everything can be worked out if you just put it on a whiteboard or a piece of paper and diagram out what you want to do. So who here has any questions? Do we have any questions or anything so far? Nothing yet, it looks like. Nobody's raising their hand, so that's good. The next area that we have are additional action nodes. This is actually a transcription node for 11 Labs. So what this is going to do is they're going to upload the audio right here on the form. This is going to kick off the workflow. And when it kicks off the workflow, it's going to first transcribe the audio and upload it to Google Drive simultaneously. It's then going to diarize that transcript, which means it's going to take all the words and the timestamps and everything else and punch through them. It's then going to process that call, convert it to Markdown, put it back into a special type of Markdown for Google Chat. It's then going to send it to Google Chat, fire off an email, and store it in Airtable. All of this happens in a fraction of a second. It's really quite impressive what you can do with N8N. Now, above here is a little bit of a better example of parallel routing. You can see I have multiple OpenAI nodes. I have nodes merging things, inputs merging, all that different stuff. And this is a little bit more of an advanced workflow. You can see there's a lot more to do here than in the original one. And this is a project that I'm working on for a client where it actually analyzes the work. It actually analyzes the calls and gives you all the information about the sales and quality of the call for doctors and patients. So it's a super, super cool little tool that we built for doctors to be able to upload their patient communications and then actually assess themselves using AI and then store that in a Airtable. So that is the basics of N8N. When you go into N8N, and the first thing you're going to find is in here, you have the ability to create a workflow. When you create a workflow, it's going to ask you to add a step. When you add a step, you're going to have to pick a trigger, right? So this is where the paper comes back into play, or the whiteboard comes back into play. When you're writing on that sheet, or you're writing on that whiteboard, you always start with step one. What is going to make this trigger? Is it on a recurring basis? Does it need to be a webhook? Does it need to be an app event, form submission, a chat, what have you? So you're going to write that first step or put a question mark sometime. And the next thing you're going to have is what actions you want to take against the data that's passed into N8N from that trigger. So that's where N8N really gets powerful. If you start being able to, sorry, my nose is itchy. You start being able to manipulate the, you start being able to manipulate that data that's passed in. Now you also have the ability to start from a template. The template library is super cool. If you actually go over here to templates and click see more templates, there are 8,324 N8N templates in the community repository. So if you can think of it, someone's already probably thought of it, and you can just download it for 100% free, troubleshoot the scenario, customize it to your needs, and run it that way. Meaning that you don't even need to be an expert in N8N to just download a template and deploy it, because it'll actually tell you when you import the template, what credentials you need, how to set them up, everything like that. So there's so much power inside of N8N with what you're able to do that you can't in some other platforms. Phil has a question, which is, can you build an app in Level and Cursor that connects or builds into an N8N scenario? Absolutely. All you need to do is have that app make an API call or a webhook call from the application into N8N, whether that's to get data from a third-party platform like High Level, or to send data into High Level or another third-party platform. So that pretty much covers, we're about 45 minutes, that pretty much covers the initial intro to N8N. In our next session on Wednesday, we are going to get a little bit more in depth on building scenarios, and we're going to go through some whiteboarding process. And I might even bring on Michael Pachito to document and diagram out some of these automations. So now that you've signed up on N8N.io and you have that free trial this week, what I want you to do is to try and think of something. The easiest ones to do are things like receiving emails or contact form submissions or webhooks out of High Level. But I want you to think of something that you wish you could automate in your daily life, and then come ready to talk about what you wish you could automate. And next time we will go around the room and we will talk about some of the different automations that people have. So with that said, does anyone have any questions before I let all of you get back to your day? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, I am in Las Vegas for a couple days helping out a friend. So If you have any questions, please reach out in the Legendary Academy, one of our amazing moderators. Also, thank you to Jennifer Supermeyer, who just volunteered to be one of our moderators, and everyone else that has been really keeping our community clean. Feel free to post your ideas in the NNN chat, and feel free to tag me, and I will happily answer any questions that anyone has. All right. Well, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys on Wednesday.